When I first came to Ner Yisrael, what you have to realize is that when you think of a melech, he was a melech. I never met a melech before. That was my first time. It was my first time coming in contact with Malchus. But some of the stories you could only really appreciate if you understand what a melech is. Stories like, which you hear about or read about, of when a lady's car broke down and he stopped his car on the highway or on the road and crossed the street to help the lady with her car. It's an act of chesed, but someone with the trait of malchus does it. Someone who's spent every moment of his day learning, it leaves a different impression on you. And I felt that Rabbi Tendler really cared. I really felt that he cared. He would come up to me in the beginning. He knew that I was a newcomer, and in a certain way, it felt like he was doing Hachnasas Orchim. He would ask me, how was your Shabbos? How are things going for you? And there's 250 Bachrim there, and I wasn't the only newcomer, so he clearly kept tabs. At least on me, and I have no reason to assume things were different for anyone else. I loved the schedule. I loved the setup. Just everything about it was so beautiful. They started the first Tuesday night of Elazman, and in the very beginning, there were no secular studies. That didn't start till after Sukkot. We had like a long, nice break in between, lunch and shir, and then again between that and night seder. So on one hand, we were like learning all day, but there was time for activity as well. One of the things that I always doubted whether I would be able to do was this concept that was started. Apparently it was started by Ner Yisrael, started by Rabbi Tendler, and I ended up doing it, and I owe him a lot of Akar Satov for this program, because it's really the best learning that I ever did. And either way, there's an enormous amount of Akar Satov, because this mechina was the most perfect setup for me, and I never came across such a setup ever again. Of all the years in yeshiva, there never was such a setup where it was a structured environment, like goal-oriented, but not too structured. You had to learn. You didn't necessarily have to learn in the Beis Medrash. You didn't. You could learn in the Beis Medrash. You didn't have to. A lot of times at the end of the year, when it came time for the Masechta Bechina, I would lock myself up in a classroom and just learn. Sometimes that's the way a person learns best. No distractions, nothing like that. All the other yeshivas, in general, yeshivas are based upon attendance. So this was an amazing setup, and the structure was put together by Rabbi Tendler. Rabbi Tendler would speak to us every Friday morning. He would tell us the main message was either don't waste your life, or you have such a beautiful life, don't waste it. A lot of people say the main message really was, you have a beautiful life of Torah. But a lot of times he would read the obituaries to us of people that did not have Torah, and he felt they could have done a lot more with their life. He felt, and even though it said good things about them, he felt they could have done more with their life. And he was encouraging us to do more. He planted seeds. But he planted seeds, and he would tell us at the time, but he's telling it to us anyways, because one day we will understand it, and the seed will sprout. There was a story, there was a time, I was in 12th grade, there was a certain bacher in the dormitory. He was very, very stark, would spend many, many hours learning, very matzliach in his learning. He stayed up very late learning, and he missed Shachris. Rabbi Tendler usually does not come to the dorm, at least when I was there, and it was a scary thing when he came to the dorm. Rabbi Tendler walks into the room, he picks up the person's head, and he drops it. The head hits the pillow, so the Bachar wakes up. What does Rabbi Tendler say to him? Did you say Kriya Shema? Okay. The answer was no, he didn't say Kriya Shema. So I think, it's my personal belief, that the reason he did that was not to make him feel stupid, but it's because that was planting a lifelong seed. That's one thing that made Rabbi Tendler very unique. The other one was just the malchus, and another one was his anivus, especially regarding the job. He was idealistic. Either I'm here or I'm not here. If he feels this is not the best yeshiva for you, l'shem shamayim, the terminology that us Bachrim would use is that the guy was kicked out. And I think in Rabbi Tendler's terms, I think you could learn better elsewhere. He would always find a place for that Bachar to learn. But you had to realize that could happen at any moment. There wasn't a board that he could consult, or he wasn't worried about his image. And then it didn't matter whether the person came from a wealthy family or not. There's stories of times where he kicked out, again, in his term, he placed a person who wasn't there, Yisrael, placed him in a different yeshiva, which the Anhala told him, you can't do it because the family has a lot of money, you need the money, we need the money. But he said simply, either he goes or I go. Rabbi Tendler didn't need to be doing the mechina. He actually had his own farm. He had an income from there, and he would just sit and learn. At the end of the day, Ner Yisrael let him run the high school. So that's one reason why people had a fear. The questions Rabbi Tendler asked were always very simple questions. So simple that you might not even know the answer to it, and you might just feel like an idiot. Maybe. Here's a couple examples. Like, one day we were in the Beis Medrash, and I was learning, and Rabbi Tendler came up to me, and either he came up to me or my friend, and he said, "Where are you right now?" He said, "The Beis Medrash." "What are you doing?" "We're learning." "So you're in a house, you're in a what does Medrash mean?" I don't know. He didn't know. Well, it's it's just like, how could I not know what the word means? He said it means to search. So then, what are you came to the house of searching. What are you searching for? Now, I was learning. What are you searching for? You're searching for, I don't remember his exact words, but you're searching for Hashem, you're searching for Torah, you're searching. It's called a Beis Medrash. He would ask very simple questions, or at least they sounded simple. They sounded too simple to not know the answer. Either they were simple, or he just had a way of asking it that made it sound very simple. And he was a Talmud of Avraham Kotler. There are people that came to Baltimore in the beginning, they detected the fire of Avraham Kotler. And they detected that in Rabbi Tendler, not anyone else. He wasn't a Talmud of Ner Yisrael, which, by the way, perhaps the Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to make it clear. Rabbi Tendler is here because Hashem wants him here, not because he's a Talmud of Ner Yisrael. Rabbi Tendler brought the fire of Avraham Kotler to the Mechinas Ner Yisrael. Ner Yisrael was well known as a yeshiva that allowed college. Maybe they didn't look highly upon college, but Avraham Kotler was unheard of for people not to go to college, and Rav Aaron Kotler brought that novelty to America. So in a certain way, they were opposites. It was the opposite. The Ashkafa of the Mechina, in a certain way, was the opposite. I think the Ner Yisrael Yeshiva became more to the right over the years, but still, you had a Lakewood. It was really run by Rabbi Tendler, and you also had Balei Tshuva feeding into the yeshiva in Gerim, and it was an awesome. The whole makom was like a place that's very hard to understand how it could exist. B'derech hatavo. I think the hardest part to understand, or maybe the biggest raya that there's a siyata d'shmai going on, was something which in the book I briefly read upon, which I don't remember this being an actual program, but it was called a hachana program. It was something, but you don't even have to come on to any type of a program. They would take bachrim with very, very weak backgrounds and put them in the appropriate shir, and within 6 months, the bachar would be all caught up. It was like proof that by Torah, there's a special siyata d'shmai by everyone, but especially in the beginning, there's even more and more of a siyata d'shmai than anybody else experiences. You're seeing Hashem at work. This is a yeshiva which the shiurim are as advanced as the other places. He said the shiurim are going to be in English, but there's going to be enough Yiddish put into the shir that you can go on to other yeshivas and you could chop what's going on. You could do well in other yeshivas because there's enough Yiddish put into the English. I don't know if that means that the whole yeshivish language was invented in Eretz Yisrael, or if it's really just like that across America. I remember that the year after I was in Eretz Yisrael, my family went to see my sister on the East Coast. She was a counselor in the camp. But somehow we ended up in Scranton for Shabbos. It might have been planned, it might not have been planned. The one thing that wasn't planned is that it also was the Sheva Brachos of one of the elephants. Elephant is a family name that's related to Rabbi Tendler. So Rabbi Tendler was there. The Vol Shabbosim to be there. And Rabbi Tendler saw me, he put his arm around me, and he's like, "How was your year?" It felt like he really cared. And he did. There's a lot of stories of people acting with chutzpah, and he knew exactly, each case was different. He had a havana of people to know how to respond. I think with me, in 12th grade, I requested to be in his Bekiyas share. He was surprised. I don't know why, but he said sure. So I was in his Bekiyas share. Much of the Gemara, really, I learned by myself. But in his share, he would tell us stories. Some of the stories were similar to what you'll see in the book, but they were worded a little bit differently. One such story is when Rabbi Neuberger wanted to try to help many of the Iranian Jews leave Iran, and so that they could become B'nai Torah, come and learn in the yeshiva so they could become B'nai Torah. It happened to be Rabbi Tendler didn't think it was a good idea in the beginning. Rabbi Tendler changed his mind once he saw what was happening, and he was fully on board with the program once it was happening. They went to, Washington, D.C. is close to Baltimore. They tried to extend the visas on one trip to make it easier for the Iranian Bachrim to stay in the yeshiva, and also to make it that they would accept more of these Bachrim into America. And they were having a difficult time. It wasn't so easy. In fact, Rabbi Tendler told us he thought there was not a chance in the world. Rabbi Tendler said he was learning, and Rabbi Neuberger came up to him and he said, "We're going to go over there." In the book it seems to describe a little bit of a different situation, so I don't know. Rabbi Tendler said, fine, he'll go. He didn't really think anything was going to become of it, and nothing really was becoming of it. But then, after they were rejected by government officials saying, we can't really help you, an official who was way at the top saw Rabbi Neuberger. He comes up to him and he hugs him. In the book it doesn't mention the hug, but Rabbi Tendler he just hugs him. I guess he called him Herman. How are you? Do you remember me? He said, 30 years ago, I had a headache, or he had some type of an illness, and you really cared. Rabbi Neuberger really cared, and you made sure I had the right doctor, and what could I do for you? And Rabbi Neuberger said his request, and he did it. The government official did it. They came into Ner Yisrael. Rav Chaim Weinreb used to say that the Bachrim with the highest level of Yiras Shamayim were all from Iran. And the reason for that is because the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts a Melech down here is so that we could relate to him being Melech. The reason why we have a king down below is so that we could relate to Hashem being a king. But nowadays we're so low that we don't even have a king. We can't even relate. It's very hard to relate to a king. We don't even have a king here in the U.S. But in Iran, they do have a king. So in Iran, they're able to chop what it means to have a melech. Memela, their Yiras Shamayim, in general, is on a higher level. Other examples, by the way, of him asking simple questions. I remember, on Shavuos, this year's Shavuos, actually, here in Chicago, it was in the 90s. It was hot. One place it said it was 89, 91. I remember at 12th grade in Israel, Shavuos, it was also hot. And we were eating at Rabbi Tendler's house because I was in his Bekiah share. And it was simple questions. We say, Pitachtel Moserai in Hallel. What does that mean? Anna Hashem Kiani Avdecha Ben Amasecha. What is Ben Amasecha? It was like simple questions that he would ask. There was a certain simplicity about him. At the same time, I realized that I had him after he was actually a Rebbe. And apparently his shiurim were... He really covered a lot of mefarshim in the shiurim that when he used to give the shiurim. I remember once I asked him a question. It says in the Gemara Brachos that it says. Not Gemara Brachos. Barasi Yetzer Hara Barasi Torah Tavlin. I created the Yetzer Hara and I created Torah as its cure. That's how it's usually translated. I went to Rabbi Tendler and I told him that the Yetzer Hara comes to me. I go and I learn. And not only does the Torah not work, it makes my Yetzer Hara worse. So, he said that my problem is that I'm not learning L'Shem Shamayim. So, I don't know if he was right or not, but he said if I'll be learning L'Shem Shamayim, then Barasi Torah Tavlin. Barasi Yetzer Hara with Barasi Torah Tavlin. I had a weather radio when I was in yeshiva. Now the rule is, in Ner Yisrael, you were not allowed to have radios. But the rule didn't cover weather radios because no one's really heard of a weather radio. Now many people might think a weather radio is an AM, FM radio that is all weather, that could, weather resistant. It could be raining, but that's not really what a weather radio is. It's a NOAA weather radio. It only picks up the National Weather Service. That's a unique thing for a yeshiva bacher to have. It's not like we're living in Tornado Alley, but weather was my passion. And one morning, for some reason, my roommate got very angry. I think his alarm, whatever, he got very angry and he decided to smash it. So I went to Rabbi Tendler and I told him my roommate smashed my weather radio. And he said, "A radio? You have a radio?" I said, "Yeah, but it's a weather radio." And I don't remember where the conversation went from there. Just the focus really was on the radio. It seemed like he was fine with there being a weather radio. And that was that. So one time I was jogging, it was during lunch, and I was coming back to the yeshiva, and Rabbi Tendler's car pulled up, and he saw that I was late. So he just said, "You're suspended for today. You're late, so you're suspended for today." Suspended means that you're not allowed to go to English classes. So that was the consequence. I was not allowed to go to English classes. I worked very, very hard, and I actually got all of the bechinas done, and I ended up getting a 90 on my Mesechta Bechina, and Rabbi Tendler wrote a comment something along the lines of that he said, "You surprised me. You surprised me." For the story that was very impressionable on me, and it happened when I was in 12th grade. So there was one night, we're sleeping, and suddenly the fire alarm goes off. All of us, we have to get out of bed, we wait outside the dorm, the fire trucks come. I don't know if it was a real fire, not a real fire. The assumption seemed to be that it wasn't a real fire. We go back to bed. A couple of nights later, the same thing happened. Now, apparently, whenever this happened, the building where the Beis Medrash was and the English classrooms were would get broken into, especially the principal's office, the English principal's office. This happened again also. Now, near Yisrael, there happens to be a lot of stories, not like this. This was unique, but stories where people are doing things wrong, and the yeshiva is pretty good at catching people. But this time around, they were not able to catch the person who was doing it. They had no idea what was happening. And Rabbi Tendler brought all of us into the Beis Medrash, and he said, "This is a sad day. The streets have made their way into the yeshiva. And if anybody knows any information about this, they're obligated to report it to the Anhala." And even with that, they got no information. It happened again. So finally, the yeshiva decided to put invisible ink, this powder on every fire alarm. There clearly was someone pulling the fire alarm, someone who seemed to have a lot of anger in them, and they would distract the whole yeshiva. While the yeshiva was distracted, they would break into I think it was called the Ed building. I believe the person was angry at the principal because there were some death threats that were left on the voicemail of the principal. I remember being woken up in the middle of the night, and with a flashlight they were checking to see if my hand had the blue ink. My hand had blue ink on it because blue ink pens tend to spill on my hand, but they were able to tell that this was not the ink they were looking for. They went through everybody's hand in the dorm, and everybody was innocent. Again, they could not find the guy. So, this is quite a mystery. They went into the Beis Medrash dorm, and the story goes that they finally did find the guy. I don't know the guy's name. I know a couple details about him, but I don't really know much about him. But one thing that I can tell you is that there was nobody kicked out of the yeshiva. Nobody. And the story goes, Rabbi Tendler waited until the summer. He didn't want to embarrass anyone. And if it's the person I'm thinking of, this person actually completely turned around, and they accepted his tshuva. And he ended up having a lot of hatzlacha in life. But I don't know how Rabbi Tendler handled it exactly, how he handled making sure that this never happened again, but at the same time not embarrassing him so that people didn't really know who he was. And I can't really say for sure that I know who it was. I wish that Rabbi Tendler extended high school, which, since the Torah doesn't really hold of high school, there's nothing that says that learning should end when you're in 12th grade, and it doesn't. I really wish he would at least have extended it to 13th grade, but as my wife pointed out, that would be crossing borders, intruding on the yeshiva. Let me just say one more thing about planting seeds. Rabbi Tendler really wished to get it all packed in there. There was a shir, it was always on Parshas Lech Lecha, on Friday, every Friday, only for 12th graders. And people really called it a marriage shir. That's really what it was about. How Avraham treated his wife. And I personally believe that also was about planting seeds. It was about, Rabbi Tendler knew there's going to come a time we're going to get married and we're not going to be in his yeshiva. It was like his yeshiva, but it only goes up to 12th grade. I wish it went up forever, but it didn't. So he has to get it all in there. So he really took full achrayus. He really cared about everything. And just to give you an idea of how much he cared. When we said Shema in the Beis Medrash, first of all, Rabbi Tendler was tall and built, and his stender was tall and built, and no matter where you were in the Beis Medrash, it looked like he was looking at you. He had those squinty eyes, so you can never really know where the eyeballs were, so you could easily either imagine the eyeballs were looking at you, or maybe they were looking at you. I think it was told to me in the name of the Tanya that if you really want to become a Yarei Shamayim, just picture a person being with you at all times. So that became easy to just envision Rabbi Tendler's watching you at all times. And it became easier to envision that when you're davening there. But what was interesting, and he would face us because he was on the Mizrach, but what's interesting is that when we said Shema, his eyes never closed. I never saw his eyes close. It's not that any of us can even really check, but it was said that he has a special heter because of chinuch. I don't know if that was true or not, but that's how much he cared. He can't let go for a second. He can't. He would always say, your panim is a reflection of your pnimius. You could see the pnimius on a person's panim. And when a person davens, you could see their davening. You could see it on their face. And he didn't want to even miss a second. The story was said in the book, but the way Rabbi Tendler worded it was slightly different. I'm going to say the way Rabbi Tendler worded it. There was a group of Bacharim in Lakewood. They discovered that there was a certain Bachar that had inappropriate material, whether it was books or magazines, something that he was hiding, maybe under his bed. And they went to Rav Kotler. They wanted him to be thrown out. Rav Kotler said to them, he said, I hear what you're saying, but what could I do? I see the way he davens. I see the way he learns. And I can tell you that he's working on himself. So Rav Kotler ignored it. In the book it says nowadays he's a Rosh Yeshiva. So Rabbi Tendler said sometimes there's things that you're just supposed to ignore. And people said he had a sixth sense. So he just knew. He knew when to do that, when not to do that. What are real issues and what could we just let go? We don't have to deal with right now. I think the place is hidden because it's disguised under the name Ner Yisrael, when again, the Mechina really was not Ner Yisrael. It was really Rabbi Tendler's Mechina. Rabbi Tendler was into Michtav Eliyahu. That was a chiddush that I learned from the Sefer. In his B'kiyah shir, so we would start off the shir learning Shari Tshuva. So Rabbi Tendler was a Bal Musar. He was a Bal Musar. His thinking was very much attuned to the Michtav Eliyahu. We learned Shari Tshuva. And I just wanted to mention 3 stories that he told us. So when he was in Lakewood, he just told us a story about Rav Heinemann. Now, Rav Heinemann is a very shticky guy. I'm sure there's a lot that's gone on since I've left Ner Yisrael, but 24 years ago. But he's known as, there's a story of him bringing his car into the living room to work on his car. But the story that Rabbi Tendler told us was in Lakewood. He wanted to pull the shtick. Sorry, I have a cough. He wanted to pull the shtick where he made it look like the sukkah, his sukkah, was coming min shamayim. So apparently he built a sukkah and he somehow lowered it onto the balcony. I guess there was like one of those types of strings that you can't really see but was really strong. Maybe the string went over the roof and maybe he stood on the other side, something like that. And he had the entire sukkah already made, and it was put together so well that it stayed intact as it was attached to these strings. And it mamish apparently looked like the sukkah was coming mamish min shamayim all the way down. It should be pointed out that Rav Heinemann actually ended up in Ner Yisrael. The book says this, due to Rabbi Tendler. They asked Rabbi Tendler, do you have any friends that could teach the 12th grade? So the first year it was Rav Nussbaum, the second year it was Rav Heinemann. I thought that was just amazing. Rav Heinemann's a very big name by me. I've heard his name a lot, and just I always associated him with like Baltimore and Ner Yisrael, but you see a lot of these people were from Lakewood, and it's just an incredible, when you hear the background of how people got to Baltimore, you just realize the impact that Rabbi Tendler really had. That's story number 1. let's go on to story number 2. I believe he mentioned Shlomo Carlebach. I don't know a lot about Shlomo Carlebach, but if Shlomo Carlebach was learning in Lakewood, then this story makes a lot of sense. I think Shlomo Carlebach was involved in this story, but there was someone that just he thought he was holier than everyone. So they decided to play, this little prank. I don't know if Rabbi Tendler was involved or if he was just a witness. For some reason, he told us this in Shir. It probably was connected to the Shari Tshuva, that a person, I assume, shouldn't look like they're frommer than everyone. Like mechzi ke yuhara. Sometimes a person's not allowed to do something because this is something that only Gedolim do, and probably was connected to that. So there was someone in Lakewood that did look, and it seemed like he felt frommer than everyone. So at night when he was learning, perhaps he was the only one in the Beis Medrash, one of Rabbi Tendler's chevra hid in a stender. He hid inside a stender in the front and called this person's name. Let's say the person's name was Ephraim. And he made it look, to Ephraim, it looked like he was hearing a baskol. And they just wanted to see how would he respond to it. I don't know exactly what the point of the story was, but I can tell you Rabbi Tendler knew what the point of the story was because he was telling us the story in Shir. So there had to have been a point. Sometimes the point, by the way, could very well just be, humor opens a person's mind and they could remember the Shir better, which that's something also I think is a maila about Ner Yisrael. Just there's so many stories that just, it energizes. I remember the Shabbos that I visited, I didn't mention this before, but when I walked into the Beis Medrash after midnight, the place was jam-packed with a kol Torah. It was Friday night, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just visiting the yeshiva from the day before. Okay, now let's get on to the third story. Rabbi Tendler told us a story about there was stealing going on in the dormitory. And before I say this, I think it's important to point out that this is a very stark yeshiva, and there are just these stories of there's also some of the let's go. There was stealing going on in the dormitory. Rabbi Tendler said he knew who was doing it, but the bacher would not admit to it. The bacher said he didn't do it. So Rabbi Tendler kept trying to get the bacher to admit to it, but the bacher wouldn't admit to it. Finally, Rabbi Tendler said, "Would you make a shvuah?" And the bacher said yes. And meanwhile, Rabbi Tendler told us that he was probably more scared than the bacher. So they went to the Aron Kodesh, they pulled out the Sefer Torah, and Rabbi Tendler said he was really nervous or scared. I don't know what his exact lashon was, but it sounded like Rabbi Tendler wasn't sure himself what he would do if it actually got to that point. Rabbi Tendler was convinced that this bacher was stealing. So they pull out the Sefer Torah, they put it on the bima, he puts his hand in the Sefer Torah, and he says, "Okay, take the shvuah. Make the shvuah." And then the bacher is about to make the shvuah, and then he says, "Okay, Rabbi, I did it. I stole, I'm sorry." And I think the point of that story is, there could be many points, but I think it just, deep down, people Baruch Hashem, still have Yiras Shamayim. There's still a sensitivity somewhere there when you're learning Gemara you learn about what a shvuah is. So sometimes there's averas that we become desensitized to. But making a shvuah, a false shvuah, is not something that we've become desensitized to, and it's super scary. So the Bacher admitted to it, and that's the story. Just want to correct something that was said earlier. To the story when my roommate smashed the weather radio. I remember I went to Rabbi Tendler after davening, and I said, Rabbi, I'm scared to death. And he said, why are you scared to death? I said, because my roommate just gets really angry, and he just does things, just destroys things. And today he just totally smashed my weather radio. So he said, you have a radio? Okay, but it was a weather radio, as pointed out before, which was fine. It only picked up a signal from the National Weather Service. It only got weather. But then he said, oh, but you said you're scared to death. Why are you scared to death? I think I just said I was just trying to tell him how I felt, or how I said, fine, I'm not really scared to death, but whatever it was just a story. Rabbi Tendler said that sometimes parents say their kids, they come home, they want the television out, they're so different, so what are you running over there, a mental hospital? And Rabbi Tendler said he tells the parents that they're right. He takes crazy people from the street and he makes them normal again. I remember when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa, there was a big race going on September 1999 with the home runs, the number of home runs they were hitting. On this particular Friday morning, one had 56, one had 59. Rabbi Tendler spoke about what a Chilul Hashem, in theory at least. He said that all they can do is they could act like a gorilla more than you and I. They could take a piece of wood and hit a ball 500 feet. I mean, a gorilla could even do it better. And yet there are Bachrim that would give them more kavod than the Rabbeim. That was the Chilul Hashem. Rav Kalman had a different perspective and addressed the Kiddush Hashem part of it, which is not relevant for this, but that's also something that was very enjoyable in Eretz Yisrael, how you had so many different Rebbeim. And again, this was it was being run by a one-man show. It was being run by Rabbi Tendler, so you could almost make at least that's what I believe. You can make a whole episode on just the Mechina, and just that itself is saying plenty about Rabbi Tendler. People go wild spending money on Shaluch Manos. In Yeshiva, the minhag is just to give to people who you're not friendly with. And then Shabbos Shalashudis, Rav Kalman got up, and he passionately does. He said Shaluch Manos is never ever to be given to people who you're not friendly with, only to people you are. And it turns out it's a machlokas rishonim. I learned about that in the mirror, and it's a good thing that we have the machlokas. But this is something that this was set up. I mean, this is I was trying to figure out when Rav Kalman was hired, how. So I don't know the story by each one, but it was just such a pleasure, and the Mechina, getting to hear the different Mahalchim, and actually it's more than that, how the Rebbe that personified that Mahalach is the one that spoke. It's something that was very enjoyable and unique in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Rabbi Tendler would ask the seniors to take down the banner of Mishenichnas Adar Marvin Besimcha right in the beginning of Nisan. And then Rav Kalman would give us shmooze about how if a banner is to be up in Adar, Kal V'Chaimer, a banner has to be up in Nisan based on the Medrash, that the peak is the 15th of Nisan. This is all orchestrated by Rabbi Tendler. This was his mechina. He had his shita, but this was the rebbeim that were working for him. This is what he wanted, that we should be exposed to different mahalchim. And I think in that regard, one could just go on and on. Be more stories, I'm sure. One year on Lag BaOmer, and this is really the only video that I remember. So he would show us a video on Lag BaOmer, and it was an interesting video. There really wasn't any Torah in the video, but it was such classic Rabbi Tendler. The video would show, the opening scene was a person eating a banana, and then there was someone in the background announcing it. And the person would say, what exactly is the difference between man and animal? And when he said animal, the screen would switch over to a monkey eating a banana. And then you would see the two of them side by side. And they were eating the banana in the exact same way. And then it went on to show people racing in the Olympics. And then animals racing. And then it went on from activity to activity. Everything looked the same. And it was quite a long video. You know, I don't remember each activity. But at the very end, but also man has air conditioner, and then it showed ants that made a whole air conditioning system for the wind to come into the holes in the mountain. And at the very end, it said an animals fight and people fight. And it showed animals fighting, and then it showed people fighting. The difference is when animals fight, they only hurt themselves. But when people fight, they destroy the whole world. And that's how the video ended. Rabbi Tendler used to speak a lot about trying to emphasize, to try not to be like an animal. And many times we're more like an animal than we think we are, and do things the way a human being should do it, or a Ben Torah. A Ben Torah should do it. It has to be done differently. And if the animals are doing it the same way we're doing it, and we're doing it the same way the animals are doing it, then perhaps we should reconsider the way that we're doing it. Hold the banana differently. The person that don't eat it in the same way that the monkey does. I have a memory of Rabbi Pesach Kron coming to Ner Yisrael to speak in Mechina Beis Medrash. He's a storyteller, and it's something unique, and it makes Yontif special when you have someone like that there. Someone that I knew from childhood, really. I don't know if he was asked to leave or what the exact story was. Rabbi Tendler used to learn with him every week on the phone. And he actually had a positive relationship with Rabbi Tendler. You know, every year we had a mesiba at the very end of the year. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful dancing. And so one year, so it was really my year, we had someone, and I don't know if should mention the name or not. But the mesiba was super beautiful. We had a professional singer in our grade, someone who had a band and was even, he was on the whole chabura of MBD Shweki. So he was part of that whole chabura there. And Rabbi Tendler got up and he said, I want to thank Ploni Almoni for making this a beautiful mesiba. It's beautiful, but not very beautiful. Because it would have been very beautiful if he would have been in the Beis Medrash, not practicing on his keyboard after Marv. I mentioned that story because that's... I know there's people who will disagree, obviously, but that's a story of Rabbi Tendler, and that's something that he said, and sometimes he would say some shocking things. Another time, it was Friday morning. I can't swear what the day was, but I know he was up there by that stender, and it was after davening. And he said that the Bachrim have such beautiful faces, but during Bein Hazmanim, people look so ugly. They look so ugly. Why? And he said, you know why? Because the panim is a reflection of your pnimius. And when you're steiging, your panim is beautiful. But he could tell, he said, during Bein Hazmanim, people are falling apart. They're being nichshal. And to him, the panim, people's faces looked ugly. I'm pretty sure he even said the word ugly. I'm pretty sure he said that word. I hope people got chizuk from this. The people that knew him, these stories remind people. What they do is they remind people what he was all about. To those that know him, and it triggers other memories that people have, and positive memories. And many people were very inspired by him. It was amazing how there was like a fan club, there was like a Rabbi Tendler fan club, not like, it used to be that was like an expression. Now, I know on the WhatsApp, there's actual chats called Rabbi So-and-so fan club, so I don't mean there's a Rabbi Tendler fan club like WhatsApp chat. Maybe there is, maybe there's not, but he has a fan club. Of people that he really inspired them, and beyond just planting seeds. It's not just planting seeds for the future. People went through serious changes. I think they were inspired by how emistic he was, and stuff like that. So, thank you for listening. Rabbi Tendler, again, he was one from a different generation. Not just that, even in that generation, he was very unique. And again, I owe him an enormous amount of Akar Satov. The structure of the yeshiva was such that it was the most ideal place for me to learn, and there could not have been a better place. And the high school program was part of it. So what's important to realize is sometimes people from maybe more modern backgrounds will say that, listen, I'll learn a little bit in high school, but there's so many people that they get into learning when they go to Eretz Yisrael. So when I go to Eretz Yisrael, that's when I'm really going to start to learn. So what you have to realize is that you are taking a risk. Besides the learning you're missing out from being in high school, but sometimes the best program of learning for you might actually be a high school program. I'll just say, Rabbi Tendler started it. Rabbi Tendler ran the show. Rabbi Tendler went into the Olam HaEmes, and different people took over for him. I don't know what it's like there now, but it's my belief HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give to them and has given to them the koichos, the ability to continue to run it in the same way that Rabbi Tendler ran it. that would be a bracha. What's my bracha? You say, what's the bracha worth? But the Gemara bracha says, I'm sure there's nothing more than what Rabbi Tendler would want for that. There was a lot of chinuch that he did that people don't know about and don't get credit for, especially the structure and the sviva that he created. I think we could say it even a little bit better. Not only would the mechina be run the way he ran it, but it would be even better. It doesn't have to be run the same way. It would be adjusted to the modern generation, so nothing would be taken away. You know, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it says one of the 48 ways to be kohen Torah, one of them is to listen umosif and to add on. So you don't change anything from what your Rebbe said, but then you add on your own thing. So not that anyone needs my bracha, but I'm sure that's exactly what's happening, and it would be wonderful to visit the Mechina again and see what it's like. Thank you for listening. I wish everybody a good Nacht, and we're actually holding Motzei Shavuos, but we're also Erev Shabbos Kodesh, so I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos.